Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Money Matters, because after all, money does matter. Or does it? Let's ask 3 questions this week and let's dive deeper into that question. Does money matter? So here is, from me to you, question number 1. Is getting financial advice important? And you might be sitting there thinking, well, financial advice about what? I'm thinking about professional finance advice. So if you wanted professional financial advice, there's a fair chance you'd end up with a financial advisor or an independent financial advisor. So that's somebody that's got various qualifications that allows them legally to charge money to advise other people what to do with their money or what not to do with their money. So I just want to share with you some sort of case studies and facts and figures that I've basically made notes of here. This first one is actually genuinely shocking. So this is a gentleman called Anthony Cartledge, and this is a former employee of TI New World, and he actually received £32,000 in compensation because of missold pension. He was working in this firm in Latchford, and his company was taken over by an Italian firm. And so anyway, he's basically taken action and he's got £32,000 worth of compensation. The IFA told us we'd be much better off, but I lost tens of thousands of pounds by following his advice. Even though I got £32,000 in compensation, the actual losses to me were over £100,000. How fair is that? So this guy, the system agrees he's been stitched up. They can see that he's lost 100 grand. So the IFA's waltzed off into the sunset, no sort of action against that person, and they get a payout of like a third of what he's owed. So is that fair? I'll just leave you to answer that question. But here's where I want to go next. This was exposed by the Securities Investment Board. Now, don't be surprised. I'm not going to be at all surprised if you don't know what the Securities Investment Board is, because it doesn't exist anymore. It's now the Financial Conduct Authority, because shockingly, this was in the 1990s. We've learned, we've moved on, you're probably thinking, and the FCA sorted it all out. Yeah? All right. Well, how about this? It's from last week. Thousands of people are receiving letters from the UK city regulator urging them to lodge claims for compensation after being wrongly advised about their pensions. Here we are, 30 odd years later, and the same old, everyone protecting everybody, old boys club and all the rest of it is still in operation. So just because somebody's got a qualification and a suit or whatever, does that mean you should trust them? Because for most of us, in order to evaluate advice, we've got to be able to understand advice. So I'm sure you'd agree, let's make an assumption for the purposes of this next argument that you don't speak Mandarin Chinese. If you went and saw the most brilliant financial advisor in the world and he gave you advice in Mandarin Chinese and you don't speak Mandarin Chinese, well, it ain't going to mean a lot to you. And many of the terms that you will get from in terms of advice will be so difficult for the average layperson to understand that they simply won't. Many of you will have heard of LIBOR rigging, PPI mis-selling. It's not unusual. If you give people a large financial incentive to do something, they will occasionally take that large financial incentive to do the wrong thing. So I'd like to refine the first question. Not is getting financial advice important, but rather I'm going to assume that you know that good financial advice is critical to all of us. So the question is, where can you go to get good financial advice that's tailored to you? Please write that down. That is question number 1. So here we go with question number 2. How do most people manage money? And for this, I want to refer to an article in the Financial Times from last Saturday, How Culture Shapes Our Money Mentality. I thought fascinating article. So I'm not going to read it to you. I'm just going to pick some bits from it because I want to share them with you. Alice, this is a fictitious name, but it's a real person. The FT tells us, and it's the FT, so I believe them. So Alice, who's a 28-year-old, healthcare manager from London, was then earning £80,000 a year. What, blimey? 28 years old and £80,000 a year, that's pretty good, isn't it? She was highly educated, first degree, second degree, so obviously, not silly, but she seemed to act like a child with her money. Well, the educational establishment, schools, universities, whatever, workplaces typically do not teach us at all how to actually cope with, how to manage money. And essentially, I won't read the whole piece, but she would blow everything. She would spend everything. She would rack up huge credit card debts. And how did she save money? Here's her investment scheme. She used to send some of her money to her parents, to her mum and dad, on the basis that then she couldn't spend it. She didn't trust herself to take that money and pay off her expensive credit card debt, 28% interest or whatever it is. So she literally, like some small child, sends money home every month so that her mum and dad can put it in the bank and she knows she's got it for a rainy day. Is that rational behaviour? Could you use your wealth differently? Could you use your income differently? Well, the answer to that is, of course you could. Why are so many people in the UK obsessed with trying to pay off their mortgage? What are they doing that for? I mean, the mortgage rate I've got on my residential property is, I think it's 1.9% or something. So if I as a property investor, if I as a business person know how to get more, a lot more than 1.9% on that money, why wouldn't I borrow as much money as I reasonably and sensibly could against my main residence and then go off and use that to build a property portfolio or whatever, or build my pension, or buy commercial property, or do whatever I know how to do? Why would most people not do that? Because that's not what our culture says we should do. It says we should have a debt-free house for peace of mind. Well, what does that mean? Normally, being skint doesn't give you a lot of peace of mind. I now want to introduce you to someone called Holly Mackay. Same article. And Holly Mackay runs a website called Boring Money. And she actually said this. I'm going to read this quote. She actually said this in this article. The retail investment industry is not fit for purpose. This is not me saying this. This is an expert in the Financial Times saying the retail investment industry is not fit for purpose. So, IFAs, high street banks. So if you go along to one of those kind of institutions expecting to get advice that's right for you, she thinks you'll be disappointed. Financial companies treat it as a dumbed down version of institutional investment, and real people don't behave like that. So she says, in her view, that normal financial advice assumes that you think entirely logically, you're trained, you're an expert, and in order to receive that financial advice, you need a certain level of qualification, which of course people don't have. And I now want to turn to Lord Mervyn King. He says that the reason people don't behave like institutions, and the reason people don't behave entirely logically, is fundamentally down to three things. Now, when you think about these, and possibly even write some of them down, individuals do not act in isolation. They act in groups. Very often, people will invest in cryptocurrency because their mates are. It's not a logical decision based on, I've run all the analysis, I've read up on it, I've read it. Oh, why are you doing it? Oh, I'm doing it because Frankie's doing it. Really? Okay. And yeah, Frankie's making great money. So I'm doing it because I can see other people around me. That is not a logical investment decision. That's based on what your peer group doing. That's interesting, isn't it? That's number one. Number two, he says, individuals are often not well equipped to judge risk. So very often they decide not to make a decision because they're scared, because they don't understand the risks. Is it risky to jump in a, military jet and land it on an aircraft carrier? Well, yeah, if you don't know what you're doing, you've never had any flying lessons. But, if you're a military pilot with 20 years experience, is it risky to land that jet on an aircraft carrier? Probably not in the scale of most things. So risk is simply a function of not understanding what it is that you're doing. If the idea of property investment scares you, it's probably because you don't have enough information, enough support. The reason you're scared is because you don't understand how to mitigate the risks. It's probably not because you bought a buy-to-let property 20 years ago and it cost you a fortune. Most people are scared, not because they did it and it didn't work, it's because they don't understand how to do it. Third, and this is really deep, he says that for most people, wealth is not about money. It's about the choices that it enables. Now, whether that's you want a nice watch, or whether that's you want to build an orphanage in the Kashmir. And there's a massive difference between the training that the professional advisors get to advise us as to what we should and shouldn't do, the way we behave, the amount of risk we're prepared to tolerate, which essentially boils down to how well educated and supported are we, and what does wealth actually really mean to us? So most of us are not equipped to have that discussion because we don't understand that about ourselves, which is why I'm sharing it with you today. Let's now have a bit of a look at some of the factors that stop people learning how to manage money correctly. We've talked about some of them. Many people are embarrassed. They're in some way, shape or form ashamed to admit what they don't know. The only stupid question is the one that you don't ask. Here at Touchstone Education, we assume nothing and want to know everything, okay? Because if you just take the word assume, let's split that into 3 bits. Ass, you, me. Assumption makes an ass out of you and me. Please try not to assume anything, and I certainly work my level best not to make many assumptions. So having a trusting, open environment where you can ask those stupid questions, or what you perceive to be stupid questions, which aren't, is one of the primary motivations why in 2014, me and my wife Annika founded Touchstone Education. So looking back, wow, that's 7 years, where did that go? We are desperate to meet people who believe they're embarrassed or they feel inadequate about anything to do with money and property and business. That's why we're here. And trust me when I say this, you will never be judged in any way, shape or form for asking what you perceive to be a stupid question. Because if you don't know, you just don't know. And if you don't know, there's only one way to find out really, isn't there? It's ask. Ask a book, ask a person, ask a whatever. Could you live on £15,000 a year? What are you on about now, Paul? Well, English Private Landlord Survey 2018, government publication, it's a really useful source of data, says that only 4% of the population are landlords, which means 96% aren't. Well, how much money does the average landlord earn from being a landlord? This figure will probably shock you. It's £15,000 a year. What? I thought it'd be a lot more than that, Paul. It's not, because most landlords have only got 1 or 2 properties, and the average buy-to-let is going to give you a few £100 a month. You do the maths. Only 4% of the 4% actually earn sufficient money from property that it is their main income stream. So pretty much all the others, 96% of the landlords, still have to do a day job or, whatever. So if you want to be a professional landlord, if you want to earn your main living from property, you actually need to be in the top 4% of the top 4%, which is 1 in 1,600. It's way less than 1 in 1,000 people in the UK can actually earn a full-time living from property. So now the question becomes, well, how do I get into the top 4% of the top 4%? Warren Buffett says this: to become part of the 1%, he's talking about the wealthiest people in the world, you can't follow the 99%. The next time someone's trying to give you financial advice, let me just break it down for you. Sounds too good to be true, probably is. No such thing as a free lunch. It's going to end in tears. All right, my friend. Well, with all due respect to the people that are saying that, how do you know? Have you got tens of millions of pounds worth of property? Because if you haven't, why are you trying to tell people that are aspiring to build up a big property portfolio that it can't be done? Because if you haven't done it, how would you know? I've been a property investor for 38 years now. Now, I ain't perfect. I've got a lot of scars from things I've done wrong or whatever. But over those 38 years, I've gradually learned to become better and better and better at what I do. And I've also learned who I trust. When you're talking to me or when you're talking to Touchstone, you're not really talking to just me. You're talking to that collective mastermind of skills and experience. Now, over those last 7 years, we've just gone through a pretty special barrier. We've just gone through our 1,000th masterminder. So that means we've either got 1,000 people in or have been on our mastermind at some point in the last 7 years, and you never leave. You're part of that community forever. So if you would like to benefit from the collective experience of 1,000 property masterminders, below this video and right in the top of the text box, there'll be a hyperlink and it'll say Wealth Through Property. I'm not going to say any more about it now, but just click on it, hit the link, and your next step is come and spend 2 days with us. And if you like what you see, maybe you'll be masterminder number 1001, 1002, or depending when you watch this video, 2002, I don't know. Anyway, hope that's been interesting. You've been wonderful. I've been Paul. See you very soon.